Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, April 23rd Issaquah City Council Committee of the Whole. We have one item on the agenda this evening, ID 0381, Citywide Strategic Plan, and that's going to be presented by David Fujimoto, our Sustainability Director, and Brian Scott of BDS Planning.
Good evening, council members. Thank you once again for spending some time focused on the citywide strategic plan. I'm going to be brief and turn over the large part of the presentation tonight to Brian Scott with BDS Consulting. This is an opportunity for us to present the final revisions to the strategic plan here tonight before we proceed forward to the next step. And so really want to give an opportunity and a chance to present and tell you about the changes that have been made since the last work session that we had last week before we go to hopefully for adoption of the plan at the first meeting in May. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good evening, Brian Scott with BDS Planning and Urban Design. Pleasure to be with you here this evening. Purpose of this presentation and your discussion is to present to you and the community the final proposed strategic plan that is set up for your adoption on May the 6th. And so I want to walk through the plan for your benefit and the community's benefit, and then show you the changes that we made after your workshop last week. And that's what we're doing. This plan, the revised version based on your input last week, went out in the council packet on Friday, and it's available to anybody that hasn't seen it on the city's website. The draft plan from last Friday. Just by way of reminder, when we started on this journey toward a strategic plan just about a year ago, we identified some shared goals for the strategic planning process. They were about vision and strategy alignment, engaging diverse community voices, and an actionable plan. We're hopeful that by adopting the strategic plan, the council and the staff can develop a more disciplined approach to making sure that as the city sets funding priorities, they are informed by the strategic thinking of this process, and that the various city departments have a stronger coordination to focus on the council's priorities. We really wanted to engage diverse community voices and make sure we had community-driven priorities, and there was robust engagement that I'll go over in just a moment. And we wanted an actionable plan that actually really resulted in things happening. We wanted priorities that were realistic about the city's capacity, and we've had lots of discussion about that toward the end. We wanted to be clear on being able to assign things to specific places. We wanted the plan to drive the budget and the capital improvement decisions, and we are setting this plan up for adoption right before you go into budgeting for next year, so it should be doing that right away. We wanted to have metrics and monitoring to see how we're doing on the plan going forward, and there are success measures identified throughout the plan to do just that. And we want the plan as a communication tool to indicate the council's intent in moving forward with setting priorities for the city. And we hope that it does that with a long-term lens. At the same time, you haven't had the opportunity, and you won't till you go through budgeting, to budget each individual action item, but you have set broad intent with the goals and objectives in the plan, so that should communicate with the community. The strategic plan engagement has carried on throughout the process. Last spring, we did a community-wide survey where more than 1,000 Issaquah residents participated in telling us what their hopes and dreams were for the city. We had about a couple of dozen focus groups and community pop-up meetings at existing community events to get people into conversations about it. We had a stakeholder charrette that brought people from many of the community groups and boards and commissions to come and talk about what their priorities were, and first brainstorm the very first draft of this plan. We had quite a few staff work sessions to flesh out detail for council's consideration. And then we've had a bunch, as you all know, of council work sessions, ad hoc work groups, and individual conversations over the last year to try and shape this plan and give feedback throughout. And then finally, we had a final community survey that was completed just a couple of weeks ago, in which 150 residents chimed in with more than 500 comments about the first draft of the plan. And then we did an informal council survey to set up last week's workshop. So really lots of community engagement. We have certainly not been hiding with this process all the way through it. Just as a way of a reminder, one of the first things we did in the process, based on that initial survey and a lot of council deliberation, was approve updated vision, mission, and guiding principles for the city. The vision, as you modified it, is that Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community, creating a sustainable legacy for future generations that honors its rich history and passion for the natural environment. A lot of discussion there about each of those elements and the important sort of essence of Issaquah. The mission, as updated, is to foster a safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community through effective stewardship and quality public services. Talks both about what you're trying to achieve with the safe, vibrant, livable, and inclusive community, and what you're going to do, what it is you do as a municipal government is effective stewardship and quality services. And you refine the city's guiding principles into 5: people, environment, community prosperity, service excellence, and equity. People is about fostering community pride, engagement, strong and safe neighborhoods, and diverse opportunities. Environment is effectively steward our natural environment to ensure a sustainable legacy for future generations. Community prosperity is sustain a vibrant place to live and work with a stable and robust economy, an engaging civic culture, and an integrated transportation system. Service excellence is deliver proactive, efficient, and effective public services for residents, businesses, and visitors. And equity is ensure that Issaquah's services and outstanding quality of life are accessible to everyone. And then we identified 6 strategic priority goals. Those are illustrated on the plan in a page in the draft plan, and the priority goal areas of mobility, growth and development, environmental stewardship, social and economic vitality, city leadership and services, and infrastructure surrounding those core principles in this graphic, guiding principles. Those goals that you identified were mobility. Getting around town is easier for people who live, work, and play here. Infrastructure is an infrastructure system that is planned, designed, built, and maintained, well supports current and future community needs. Growth and development. Growth is actively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. Social and economic vitality. An economically vital and diverse community is supported by robust businesses, affordable housing, and supportive services. Environmental stewardship is environmental resources are proactively enhanced, protected, and stewarded. And city leadership and services is leadership and accountability is provided in the delivery of public services for our growing and diversifying community. So some strongly stated goals there. And then the plan also includes a collection of objectives organized under the goal. And we've spent a lot of time modifying those, and even as late as your workshop last week, we made some modifications to that. Mobility has 3 objectives about having an adopted mobility plan and funding, near-term actions, and light rail integration. Growth and development has 4 objectives about neighborhood character, effective and forward-looking implementation, infrastructure and growth, and a livable community. Environmental stewardship has protection and improvement of the environment. Community stewardship, active community involvement in stewardship of the environment, and strategic acquisitions of new lands for public use. Social and economic vitality was one of the places we made a change last week. We talking about businesses and jobs with wages that can afford people to live in Issaquah. Housing affordability and service improvements. City leadership and services, about a welcoming city with meaningful engagement and high-performing internal systems. And infrastructure is operations, maintenance, and replacement. So it's the whole set of council policy on the goals and objectives moving forward. You made, based on our notes and watching the tape of the meeting last week, you made 4 changes. The first one was a combination of 2 objectives in the economic and community vitality. We combined 2 objectives, so the trying to grow and retain businesses with jobs that provide wages, especially those that provide wages that allow people to live in Issaquah. We clarified the intended meaning of the potential actions. We had robust discussion about that, and several places in the plan we made some adjustments to try and clarify that you are adopting the vision, mission, guiding principles, goals, and objectives by adopting this plan and the success measures. That as you go into an annual cycle of budgeting and work planning, you will consider specific actions that are happening on a shorter-term time frame and budget those according to the city's resources. The listed potential actions in there are where you might go with that, but the plan is not currently a promise to do everything that's in there. So this language has been highlighted in the introductory letter, in the strategic plan terms section, and in the implementation framework, which outlines how that process will go forward on prioritizing those things. We talked about the implementation framework, which in the earlier draft had been the last 2 pages of the plan. We moved that up so it's before the individual discussions of the goals and objectives at your suggestion, so that people understood sort of how the goals and objectives fit into ongoing implementation. And then at your suggestion last week, we added educational services to the language in the growth and development objective number 4. So there's the whole plan, 4 sort of straightforward changes from that. We also fleshed out the introductory letter. I'm going to assume that you've all had a chance to read the plan that was in your packet. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, blessedly, for your sake and everybody's sake. And what we want to do tonight is check with your comfort on this and see if there's anything else that needs to happen before you're ready to adopt it on May 6th.
First, any questions for Brian or David? Anyone else from staff that we have here? Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. In our council work session, there was a flow diagram about the decisions that would be made in the budget process, and I wondered where that diagram will live.
Sure. Well, it will remain part of the record as that evening's packet. I think we can also look at opportunities as we bring forward revisions to the financial policies manual and also the council rules of procedure. So those are the 2 places that we're examining right now and thinking about where's the best fit to pull in some of that content as it relates to how you make budget decisions or how you will conduct your meetings and deliberate on items.
Other questions? Anything that we want to, comments, want to discuss, thoughts? Councilmember Walsh?
I mean, you see our faces here because we've approached this so very many times, and I've only been here for the second half of it, and I feel like we've discussed it quite a bit. I will express thank you for leading us through this. I think this has been a remarkable opportunity to assess our values and the strategic ways that we want to approach our budget. I feel like this plan has done that. I'm excited and a little little nervous about how that's going to appear in the budget period, but I think that's the direction that we want to go, and cross our fingers that it's not too bumpy of a process, but I think the plan guides us in the right direction, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh.
Council Deputy President Batiste.
I would just echo what Councilmember Walsh just talked about. This has just been, there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this and so many different touches, both from council and the administration and the community, and getting all of that feedback and seeing this come to fruition in a plan that we can go forward with feels really great. And I just want to thank everyone who's been involved, and we will see as we go forward. There'll probably still be a lot of learning and growing that we do with this new plan, especially as we go into our budget session. But I look forward to that and feeling good about where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hunt.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were looking.
Or Councilmember Good.
I agree. I think we've talked about the sort of smaller points quite a bit, but I do still wonder about how this will be used. And so I think for me, it was, it helped to see that flow diagram, which is one of the reasons why I asked about why that would, where that would live, and if it would be included with the plan itself. So for me, I wonder if that could be included as an appendix or something else, because I think, especially this first time with the budget, we'll really learn a lot about how this actually is used and how it works in practice. And so I think it would help to have that included for us and then for future council members. And then I did have another question, which was about the metrics of success. So we talked a little bit in the work session about how those are not really targets at this point. They're kind of things that we want to measure and gauge our success with. And so I wondered about how you foresee the process of actually strengthening those and making those into targets will work, especially because I think it could be problematic to define those at the time when we're actually measuring them.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. I think our overall approach with those performance metrics is that we know there's at least a couple that are undefined or need some refinement. So we'll need to go back and take a look at those. And even with the first data collection, I think our overall hope is that we'll be easing into that work, and it's a part of a broader effort citywide to look at performance metrics overall. So we will have that set of performance metrics that relate specifically to the strategic plan, and as we collect data and kind of move forward with the plan, we can start to think about what appropriate targets might be as we start to build some of that information. And then we will also have a broader set of performance measures which we'll be building out concurrently, which will also provide some information that can be informative to those. So I think it's as a part of getting into the implementation side of the equation and seeing what the data is showing us, we can check back on those and see if they really are informative to you all and the community about whether or not we're making progress on the strategic plan. So I kind of see that as a good starting place. I think we got lots of good feedback on what we're hoping those things to be able to reflect back on in terms of progress for the plan.
Okay, thank you for that. I would just, I would urge that we try to have those solidified a bit more before we actually start measuring them for the first year, so that we're not deciding our targets around the same time that we're measuring our targets, just so we can actually measure our progress towards a target that's decided independently. And then I think I do still have that question about if it would be possible to have that flow diagram as an appendix or something that's linked in some way with the plan.
We'd be happy to respond in the way that council members see fit. So other council members would like to see that one page, is that what I'm hearing, the flowchart page, attached as an appendix. I think that was the suggestion that was made, and that might be the best place to put it, to also offer an opportunity to connect back to the memo. I'd love to hear from the other council members, and we'll do as you wish.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thanks. So I was trying to read and listen at the same time. That doesn't always work out so well, so I may have missed this. Is it coming to May 6th council meeting on regular agenda? Okay.
Yes.
And I would support the suggestion that the chart gets included with the plan as an appendix or something.
Councilmember Walsh.
So, David, I'll have you stay up there. I appreciated Councilmember Hunt's question about the performance metrics. This is very important to me. So, could you perhaps, looking in our packet on page 17, which I guess is the strategic plan, page 13, which is the kind of annual cycle, can you tell me when in there we might be able to see or approach the idea of more performance metrics? Some clarifications on those?
Certainly. So I think once we have an adopted plan, we're going to start moving forward with taking a look at those performance measures and seeing when we have that data available. I think we're anticipating that as we start to move through with implementation and start to assess how we're doing, that we will start to take a look at that. I don't know that we've specifically said exactly where that would happen in terms of the refinement of the performance measures, but I would certainly anticipate that as we start to get back to looking at how we're doing with progress, that would be a good opportunity for us to say, okay, are the performance measures really giving us good information about evaluating that progress?
So part of this is the performance evaluation and the community survey. So we know that the community survey is happening now-ish.
There is one happening now.
Yep. Yes, but I'm talking about like this initial period. Much of our performance metrics rely on the questions that are in this community survey, right?
Correct. There's several. Yes.
So if the community survey is already out, and we know what those questions are, could we use that as a way to approach the reevaluation of the performance metrics rather than waiting for the data to come to us and then evaluating it as we have the data, as Councilmember Hunt said? It's not the way we want to approach things.
Of course, you're going to get, when you do the first community survey, that's going to establish a baseline of what everybody said now. And then your target would be that it moves in the direction you want it to move over time.
City Administrator Moon.
Thank you. Our intent is to bring back that data, I believe, from the biennial citizen survey or community survey in July. And so we first report out the data on that, regardless of strategic plan, diagram on the flow chart on the procedure. In July, you should hear the results of this latest community survey. We'll absorb those results and what they tell us in a very broad way, and certainly there will be data points that we pull out of that and say, okay, here are the ones that relate to metrics we have in the strategic plan. And then subsequent to that, so that's on your chart, that's around the labels listed, performance evaluation, community survey, and then report to community, report out on what data we've collected, and then strategic plan adjustment. So it's during that strategic plan adjustment time, which is kind of end of year through the workshop, the strategic and budget planning workshop, which would be spring-ish timeline, that we can entertain thoughts about adjustments to measures. We also have measures that don't relate to the community survey. Some of those measures we probably have baseline statistics for. Others are new measures. We need to go collect that baseline data, kind of examine what it tells us, have a conversation about what target we might want to set. So I envision all of that happening, say, fall to spring timeline.
So fall to spring, so some of the information we're going to have before we make our budget decisions, some of it not until spring.
So this first year is complicated, right? Because you're not getting the community survey until July. We don't yet have baseline data for some of these new metrics. So I would expect that you, when we're having this conversation about parameters, let's say, or input on the budget for 2020, you won't have all of that data this first year. Next May will be a different situation. You should have a lot more data at that point in time.
Okay.
So I want to just share, like, this journey. I have been saying for 10 years how much I want more metrics. Like, at one point I sort of fashioned myself Mr. Metric. And so I'm just so happy that we have measures that the 7 of us have agreed are super valuable. I get the idea that it would be great to have them inform the fall budget, but I don't mean to, be milquetoast about it, but I'm just happy that we're going to have them. And as we get them, some of them, if something was at 90% 2 years ago and is 89% this year, we're not going to sweat it, right? But if something's at 60% this year, 50% this year, we might sweat it. We are going to learn so much as this data comes in. And I think all the different metrics are, as they start to come in, we will see, the 7 of us will identify what things we think are the hot spots, and there may even be disagreements about those. So I agree, like, sooner is better than later, but I'm just so excited that we are at this step after so many years of talking about what sorts of metrics we want to use to make strategic decisions as a city. To have metrics that reflect community concern and are agreed upon by the 7 of us, I'm just sort of over the moon about. I will mention, since I have the floor, David, you and your team, Brian, you and your team, thank you so much for all your hard work this year. You had 7 council members with strong visions of what's important in the city and what's important in our engagement with the community and how this process should work, and the fact that we're very close now is certainly a large measure from the hard work of the public, but you both as the conductors and maestros of this effort is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Deputy President Batiste.
So when we're talking about the metrics, I think I'm looking at it in a similar fashion to Council President Martz, in that it would be great to get as much as we could sooner rather than later. But I am really looking forward to the fact that we have come to agreement on those metrics. And I really think as we go through our review session, that we'll probably be even further refining what we'd like to see in regard to that. So I look forward to that, and I am in support of attaching in the chart that Councilmember Hunt spoke about.
And I support that as well. Any other closing comments? I feel like, gosh, only a half-hour council meeting. I don't know. It seems a little weird. Anything else from the administration today? Do you have the feedback that you
If you adjourn, I'm going to put it on my resume that I got this meeting.
Kind of drag it out.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Oh, and there are no members of the public this evening, and council members Ray and Winterstein are excused. This evening.